So I want to take you through a few of my favorite ways to create separation in my mixes. And this is especially important when you have multiple things playing in your track at the same time that share a lot of the same frequencies. I have this track that I'm working on here. And in this verse part of the track, we have three things that are sharing a lot of the same frequencies. We have the vocal, this synth, and then we have the ARP. Right, and all three things are pretty heavy in this mid-range here. Technique number one is time-based. So instead of having maybe our vocal and this synth play at the same time, maybe we can write our synth melody in a way where they're not overlapping as much and they kind of give each other a bit more breathing room. There's a lot more breathing room for the vocal in these spaces in the melody. I don't love that option for this track because this synth is carrying a lot of energy in the verse. So let's check out technique number two, which is EQ. With EQing, we want to figure out what are the characteristic frequencies of each sound and where can we maybe boost one and cut the other a little bit to create separation that way. In this case, I put an EQ on the synth channel. And what I decided to do was just cut out some of the frequencies in the middle of the stereo field on the synth. And that's creating a little bit of a pocket for the vocal to sit in. You know, and I just did this with regular static EQ cuts, but you can do this with dynamic EQ. The other thing that I could have done as well is because the vocal is sitting in the middle and this synth is really wide, maybe I could even accentuate that a little bit further where we change this to side and maybe we boost a little bit on the sides. It's a bit of a logic puzzle that you're trying to figure out and you're just kind of testing things out and seeing what works best for your track. Technique number three is going to be panning. So if we take a look at this ARP here, I have an auto pan on here that's adding a little bit of movement between the left and the right speaker. Thinking of like the synth, the vocal, and the ARP. I have the vocal basically dead center in the middle. The synth that we were just looking at is super wide. And then this ARP is kind of moving back and forth just a little bit so that it's not on top of the vocal, but it's also not super wide and kind of taking away from the really wide synth that we have. I just as easily could have panned the ARP left and maybe panned the synth right and done something like this. Right, still has separation. I don't love the balance of how this feels, but again, this is your call. Maybe you love how that sounds. The next one is volume. So if you're able to prioritize and pick what you want more out front and what's more important in your mix for the listener to be focusing on, you can just do a really simple gain automation or maybe just a really simple side chain where when the vocal is playing, we just turn down the synth for that amount of time. And the last one is related to the depth in your track. So if we want our vocal to be really up front and dry, then maybe we send this synth like all the way to the back of the mix by putting some reverb on it. If I just throw like a massive reverb on this synth now it feels like the reverb is in this huge space. It's all the way at the back of the mix. And we have our vocal that's still kind of up front and more dry in the mix. There we have 5 techniques for creating some separation. You have time, EQ, panning, volume, reverb, or spatial effects. Hope this helps.